we'll start our plenary session right now. We have Sandra and Karine, and they're going to basically lead us forward for the next little while.
Perfect job. Wrong person. Okay, so I got a message from Sheila. She's going to be late, but she will be here. I guess we've talked throughout the conference about really, moving forward in a good way, and it is really time for change, and to look at our strengths, the strengths in this room that is creating change. Even having this conversation, I think, is really critical at this time. When we look at all the things that are happening, particularly in the Indigenous community, we see that, again, the rising of women and their families, and this isn't by accident. We have for many years, we talk about, mention the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and of course, the Royal Commission. And I was reminded the other day of the constitutional process. Meech Lake and Charlottetown with one of my friends, and at the time when they were discussing the constitutional process in Charlottetown, the women of the Native Women's Association of Canada and the National Action Committee on the Status of Women had organized the No campaign because women were left out of the constitutional process. All women were left out. The Native Women's Association was relegated to a dependent status under, and we're told, go see the Assembly of First Nations, go see the Native Council of Canada. So when we talk about genocide, there is the clear examples of the lack of recognition of the agency of Indigenous women as title holders, as rights holders. So what has changed since the constitutional process? We've gone to governments, we've spoken to commissions of inquiry, and we know the results. Now we have the report of the National Action, or National Inquiry. But I think what's different is that women are not expecting governments to move on their own. Women know that they have to continue to push for change. Now that we've got a roadmap, I think women across this country are going to ensure that governments are held to task. What's also different is that the Constitutional Court, that period of time, we had no Indigenous women in government, federally or provincially, and now we have Leah Gazan, right? And we have Inuit representation, and at the Senate level, we have Indigenous women. So that changes the landscape because we have voices on the inside. In different provinces, there are women that are elected. And you know, we have women elected in Indigenous bodies as well. But one thing I have to note is that sometimes it doesn't matter if women are elected if you're going to subscribe to the patriarchal standard. If you are going to change that standard and look at a more inclusive and matriarchal process, then that's what I think we can continue to support. But we cannot continue to support a patriarchal standard that keeps our women oppressed, whether it's within an Indigenous government or Indigenous organization. Community, I mean, the real governments are the community because they have the legal authority. And within the mainstream structures. But for the most part, I think we have good people who started out as, you know, advocates or street fighters, and will, you know, continue to take that fight and fire into those places of decision making. So I'm hopeful that there will be change, but also recognizing that change is going to take generations. Mm-hmm. But what can we do to see progress in our lifetimes? And I think really that's the question. One thing that we haven't really had the time to address fully is the economic circumstance of Indigenous women and our families. We know that the greater independence and economic certainty that women have, the better results for her safety and for the safety of her children. And that's why I think the guaranteed basic income is critical to creating change. So if we were to pick one of the 231 calls to justice, I would pick a guaranteed basic income, because once you can have that security, can provide a home and food for your children, then I think you can do the other things. I love that the majority of new business starts in this country are Indigenous women, that the majority of post-secondary education completions are Indigenous women. So change is going to happen. We just have to keep pressing forward. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, and to echo some of Sandra's thoughts and just to add a few of my own, I think what I've heard over the last couple of days is that there's a lot of very good work going on in different places. And the challenge I think that we have moving forward is how to put it all together and how to make sure that everybody is finding their place, is finding how they can be change makers. I think, you know, you're right to say that the landscape has changed and there's a bit of a moment here that I think that we need to seize, where people are listening, where people are paying attention. And everybody that's here today is already to some degree, or very much on side. You're all here because you acknowledge that there is an issue, or you're all here because you're all working to support change. But how do we take this work and how do we make it spread outward? How do we make it so that everybody finds their place in the work? And I think that part of what I've heard over the last couple of days is that we don't just need to change what we're doing, but we need to change the way that we think. And so there's been conversations around education, there's been conversations around economic development, there's been conversations around post-secondary education, and all of those conversations kind of are anchored on this idea that we have to change the way that we think. It was Chief Commissioner Buller that said that, it's taken over 500 years to get to where we're going, where we are, and it's going to take at least that long to get back to where we were. And so I think that that doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to do the work that we're doing, and it doesn't mean that we can't take the first steps, because we might not see what's going to happen in 500 years. But many people here have talked about the eighth generation, right? And the idea that we have to look much further forward than we'll be here to see. And I think that's really, really important. I was working on a project I guess it's a couple of years now, I don't know. It's pandemic time, it's timeless, really. But I was talking to someone, to a group of people, about this concept of gender diversity, and some very wise person pointed out that it's only gender diversity if you look at it through Western eyes. Because otherwise, it just is. And I thought that that was really important and really profound. And it kind of supports this idea that, one of the things that I think need to happen is we need to decenter this really kind of Western with blinders view and open our minds to thinking about this issue in a really holistic way. What are all of the things that contribute to keeping people safe? It is a safe place to live. It is proper supports when you need help. It is opportunity in education and training, but it's also community, and it's also languages, and it's also ceremonies, and it's also all those other things that are bound in Indigenous ways of knowing. And I think that we need to look more broadly, not just that kind of the nuts and bolts, the really practical things, but what are all the things that people need to be well? And then how do we create that environment where along every step of the way, people can find safety, they can find community, and they can find peace. So I think, I too am very hopeful. At one point, I was subjected to personality testing for a job that I wanted. And one of the things that they did was ask me a lot of different questions, I guess, to figure out if I'd be good at this job or not good at this job. And the lady called me and she said, "Oh, it's really, really good news. You did pretty well on this test." And I thought, okay, it's a personality test. I don't think you can do poorly. Like, it's just your personality, right? But anyways, I thought, okay, that's good. She's like, "Oh, there's just this one thing. The test is telling us that you're kind of like unrealistically optimistic, and we're concerned that you're going to not see reality, that you're just going to keep doing the same thing." But then she said, I think it's fine, because also the test shows that you have very little trust in people. And we feel like those two things balance each other out. So I think that's how I want to move forward. I want to continue to believe that change is possible, and that all together, in our own way, in our own place, in finding our own place as change makers, we can do good things. But I'll continue to do a bit of side eye whenever I hear about the next big thing for MMIWG, because I understand that accountability is really hard in a system that's been unaccountable for a really long time. And so I think it's on all of us to work to uphold those accountabilities, to keep people honest, right? And to continue to work for a change that we may not see, but that I think we can get to. Thanks. Hi. You're here. So Sheila, we're just kind of summing up our thoughts on what we've heard. If you wanted to, I know you just got, if you want to share a couple things, you can.
No, yeah, I'm glad I was able to make it. I'll just tell you what my little ordeal was. I'm wearing a wet shirt. Oh, no. Because I have to go out of town tomorrow, so I had to quickly I had an appointment, and I had it all timed out. I had a book signing, and then hair, and then I was going to make it in time for here. But the hairdresser got my shirt all wet and dye on the back, and it feels like my hair is two different colors. And so I left. I was trying not to be rude or angry or any kind. I just said, no, it's okay, it's okay. They kept saying, well, we'll buy you a new shirt. We'll do your hair again. I'm like, I don't have time. But anyway, it just reminded me, always stay humble and always just, things happen all the time that just seem to challenge and never stop. So here I am sitting in a wet shirt. And, I really wanted to come back because this is a very important topic, and I'm glad all of you have invested time to keep talking about it. This is probably something that you know intimately as well as we do, because it feels like this is a learning movement that we've all come together on. And so I'm very proud to be sitting with these two women and in front of all of you, familiar faces too, to talk about this. And that's one thing that I'm impressed with, but also I'm leaving with, is that all these obstacles are still here, and then probably never really go away, but they get easier and lighter to deal with. I think I probably would have cried if this happened to me with my wet shirt and my hair that I didn't like. I probably would have cried and been a puddle of tears for a good hour before, but now I'm like, I'm gonna go with a wet shirt. And so I have a lot to learn yet, and this is probably a teaching moment for me to keep learning. And I'll tell you one story though that I didn't share yesterday, maybe really quickly. When I talked about experts in our community, one person, I think she'd be okay with me telling her story because she and I have become really good friends. But she, when a woman, Sean Lamb, I don't like to say his name, but Sean Lamb was accused of killing 3 women. He was only charged in the end for 2, but because the one woman's body was never found, Tanya Nepanak. And I was reminded of that deeply when we heard about Rebecca Contois' body being searched at Brady Road landfill, because that's where Tanya Nepanak's body is presumed to be. And so I talk to Gail Nepanak every now and then. We stay in contact, and she's one person that I know that is the same age as me, and we have different backgrounds, different upbringing, but she struggles a lot in a lot of ways. I think when I really realized the differences between us and the similarities, she's definitely a strong woman, because she ended up being a spokesperson for the issue during the 2009-2010. She was a strong spokesperson, and she didn't have any formal training of any kind. She just knew what to say because she shared from her heart and her feelings. And she became a lead spokesperson in the media for it. But she, like I said, she had no training, but she became a guide to her family and then to other people. And when she got a chance to go to Ottawa to go and present, they went to the airport on the plane, the ticket that they were given, but it didn't dawn on her that they needed IDs because they didn't have any. So they couldn't get on the plane, and they had to wait a few weeks to go again. But this is the reality for a lot of people, is that they're shut out of everything so much that they never, needed ID because nobody ever thought, to bring them into these sort of circles where they need that kind of information on them and with them. And I was really flabbergasted at the time. And she continues to inspire me because she struggles a lot, but she still is very hopeful. I asked her one time what she wanted to do with her life, if she could do it again, and she wanted to be a hairdresser and do makeup. And that is such a simple and attainable dream. I mean, to be good is a different thing, but to do it and to get trained for it is another thing, right? And if that's all she wanted, all of us would probably help her if she wanted to achieve that in some way. But I don't know if anyone's ever asked her or given her the opportunity, not even myself until much later. And so I learned a lot from that situation in my friendship with her, and we lost contact just before I became Grand Chief in 2015. But when we connected again just after the election, I picked her up. She told me where she was. I picked her up, and we both had a good cry. Like, I didn't even have to say anything, and she didn't say anything. We just held each other and we cried, because I think she felt a lot of hope that I became a Grand Chief, and that she was, she still had all these things that she was concerned about. And so over the years we stay in contact, and she doesn't ask for much. She's very kind and generous with her time. I was invited to one of their sisters' memorials one time, and the family surprised me with a necklace. Like, they don't have a lot. When I say they don't have a lot, they don't have a lot. And they flabbergasted me again with this necklace that they bought for me as a family. And so even though they have perceivably nothing tangible, they still managed to scrape some what they have and give it to someone or people that they cared about. And it wasn't just me, it was other people that they were giving gifts to. So we are on the same age, same path, same a lot of things, but at the same time, I'm very cognizant that we have ended up on different levels, and in a lot of ways I feel she's way more advanced than me. And the rewards for the things that she's had to put up with and see for her, I hope will be great someday. The only time that I saw her in a weak moment was she was trying really hard for her family, but the moment that they took her children away, CFS took her children away, that's when it felt like she gave up. She didn't care about anything, she didn't care about anyone. She went to live on the streets for a little while. And that is hard as a mother, to lose children. I can't imagine, and I don't want to, but that's what I witnessed of her as a human being. And the last time I touched base with her was just a few days ago with what happened with Rebecca and the search and what they discovered. And she hasn't answered me yet on how she's feeling, so I'm patient and I'll wait for her. And I can't imagine how she's feeling, because they never found her sister's body. And when they think of her, we had this conversation one time. She said, so do we go put crosses at the garbage dump? Like, how do we visit? Like, where are we supposed to visit our family member? And that's a really sad and heartbreaking question, and nobody has an answer to that right now. And so I think about all of that, and so while I feel a lot of great things have happened, a lot of sadness, I feel like this is just evolving, and I'm glad we're all talking about it.
I just want to say, with respect to the findings at Brady landfill, my thought was, what if it's not Rebecca? Mm-hmm. What if it's somebody else? Mm-hmm. Is it, giving false hope to the family that it is Rebecca? Or is there another family, mm-hmm. Tanya's family, wondering if it's her? Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of uncertainty that comes with loss, even with the family of Jennifer Catchaway, mm-hmm. Going every year to search. And so for those families, it's never going to end. So how do we honor that loss for the families, so that they're not forgotten.
Yeah, and someone asked or wondered if there are more bodies there, right? And if it was non-Indigenous bodies there, would they be searching harder in that site? Like, I'm sure there's technology now that could detect, like, the anomalies that we're seeing in the GPRs, right? The ground penetrating radar equipment. Like, is there anything like that that could be possibly checked on those grounds and anywhere? Because there was a similar thought on the Red River, right? That's why they started dragging the red, because they were wondering how many bodies are in there. And it's a sad reality. Mhm. And I'm drinking coffee out of a glass because there's no more mugs, and I was too cold to wait for a mug.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious. She's looking for a coffee cup, and it's like, scrap a glass. That's resilience.
Yeah, so I think that's really what we were looking to sort of share as a summary, and there's no like really defined format for this plenary, so this is why we're sort of, just here. But we also want to leave some time for our elder to close off. But maybe if anybody else has any outstanding questions that you didn't get to ask about any of our work, any of the presentations, anything that you just didn't have a chance to raise that you wanted to do so now, maybe we could do that for a few minutes. I know folks are probably really tired. Like it's a big couple of days. So I think there's a mic. Yeah, if you just want to. Yeah, perfect.
Hello again, it's Shayla Elizabeth. I just want to say, in response to your comment, if I heard it correctly, generations for change. I moved here in the fall of 1997, and there is huge change, just right on the street level. Like, when I arrived, there were single moms everywhere, and now there's dads out there, Indigenous dads, pushing strollers, giving mom a break or whatever. Or you see entire families. And I never saw anyone on a bike. I thought I was the only one. And then all of a sudden, kaboom! Everyone's like on bikes, just whizzing by and everything else. And you're like, well, so what? And I'm like, on the community level, I'm seeing the youth get on their bike. I've seen some really interesting configurations to pull things and carry things and whatever, and a midnight move it, but they did it with their cart. And it's like they're pulling together as community despite everything else. So I want to say, like, 1997 to now, what is that, 23 years? Oh my goodness, been here so long. But, that's, demographers call a generation 25 years, and then I've seen it just recently as 20 years. So really, if it's 150 years since Confederation, that's only 6 generations. Mm-hmm. So that's, you can remember that far back. Some people still have, great-grandparents alive. And there was a woman, it was about a ceremony. One of the women, it was a street visual. She was 121 years old. I'm like, wow. So where do you get the lifestyle to get to that? And so there is hope. And you just got to be aware of it, in my opinion. That's all I want to say. Thank you. I really appreciated hearing everyone.
Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Thanks. Anyone else? Oh, they're coming to you.
I think you're a hope dealer, by the way.
I actually like.
Oh, sure, yeah. I can't speak for the U of W because I don't work here, but But I think that, like, to your question, how do you navigate these structures? And I think you have to start by, understanding that universities are really complex and they have all kinds of weird governance that you would never think of, that you would maybe not even assume, right? And that's one structure of power, right? So how does it work and how do you break it down into its components and how do you impact those components? Governments are the same, right? Institutions are the same. So I think, wherever you are doing work, like whatever your sphere of action is, whatever your scope, part of that work is understanding how the decisions get made and what are the levers, and then figuring out how to use them. And I think that Sandra was talking about this before, but I feel like that means that you need people on the inside doing things, and you also need the pressure from the outside, and you need to do those two things ideally at the same time. And then when they come together, that's when things change, right? So I think there are lots of folks in this room who are advocates on the inside of things, and then there are lots of folks who are advocates on the outside of things. And I think that, part of what the work ahead is going to be figuring out how those structures work, and then trying to figure out how you can make change in them. So I don't know who you can go to for the University of Winnipeg, but there is 100% for sure a way to do it. You just have to figure out what the components are and then leverage the right ones. And it sounds really mechanical, but that's actually how it works. And I've tried to do this work inside of a lot of different places, and it always takes a while, but you always figure it out. There's always a way to move things that seem unmovable. You just have to find the right buttons, I think.
Hi. I just wanted to say that in our group over here, Group B, this afternoon, that was one of the recommendations we made for the university, to have an ombudsperson, Indigenous ombudsperson, and or grandmother and or auntie to go to for all those kind of things. Right on. Okay, did you get that part? Put that on the list too, please. Okay, thank you.
I think that you've got a lot of support here, and if there's ways to do it, then I think there's lots of folks that would stand with you to do that.
And can I just add, I don't work here either. Well, I kind of do. I guess I have a contract in the business and economics department. But we're actually trying to indigenize that department, working through the folks there little by little. And so I know what you're talking about. And sometimes, I do feel a lot of hope too, and I do see great change, but you're saying it's not going fast enough, and I agree with that. And I would never minimize your experience or your daughter's experience. And sometimes that anti-energy that you talk about, we have to invoke it, right? sometimes even the act of calling the Human Rights Commission, puts things in motion, even if you don't follow through with it sometimes. And that's not what I'm encouraging you to do, but there are options. There are ways to make things move if you feel like someone's in danger, especially when you feel like someone's in danger. And then at the very last resort, I would, because I come from the media, that's the other thing you can do is tell your story in that way, her story. And that's also very intrusive though. So it's totally up to you, but I'm just saying that there are options if you feel completely at a wit's end. But I also feel this, my interactions with UFW have been very positive and open to suggestions so far. And so I don't know if it's going to need to get that far, but I'm just saying for future and other situations that we might come again, sometimes it's needed. And I've seen it happen many times where people have had to call the anti-energy and say, you know what, I'm going to get my grandma after you. And then things move.
Yeah,
so.
I also, like Sheila, kind of work here. But I also sit on the Indigenous Advisory Committee, as I mentioned yesterday, and that, that I would speak to the chair, who's Diane Rusin, to see if we can, meet with you and your specific issues and see what we can do. So thank you for bringing them forward.
Okay, so, well, thank you very much for that session. There's a lot of interesting points that have been raised, and certainly I think for the strength that we have, I think everyone's aware that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I wasn't sure about which department or faculty. I'm in the Department of Indigenous Studies that your issue is coming up with, but if you wanted to talk to me after, I could give you a heads up on which way to go. I probably know who to talk to for sure. I used to be president of the Faculty Association for a while, for a fair while, but I'd be happy to try to help you. Okay, we're going to move forward now.